Couples whose wedding was an absolute catastrophe. What happened? I've told this story before on Reddit, but here are the bulleted highlights. SO equals significant other. The wedding itself went off quickly and relatively smoothly. It was a really quick ceremony. It was before and after that were the problems. SO's stepmother told me at the bridal shower that he was never going to amount to anything and I was making a huge mistake. SO's stepmother brought her 2 young children to that shower even after I asked her not to. I didn't know if lady friends would have games with sexual innuendo as I'd never been to a wedding shower before. SO's brother brought an uninvited and unannounced girlfriend to the rehearsal and then demanded I include her in the wedding. I'd never met her before, they were from out of state, and he didn't tell us in advance that he was bringing a date. The girl stood outside and smoked the entire time. SO's stepmother gave men in the wedding party money to take him out to a strip club and get a hooker. SO's mother cried because we had not put together an intricate ceremony that she could participate in. Though we told her in advance it was better to do nothing than to try and include everyone, stepmother/bio-mother/my mom/grandmothers. SO's brother came to my hotel room the night before the wedding, drunk and crying because he and the new girlfriend got into a fight. He said she tried to stab him with a steak knife. He then told me I'd made a mistake and had chosen the wrong brother, lunged at me with his tongue out and started groping me. Next morning, I walk out into the common area where people are having breakfast. SO's father is there and begins to insult my family because of how cheap everything looks. My dad was sick and unemployed at the time, but FIL knew that, which made it more hurtful. I reminded FIL of this and the fact that I'd paid for everything myself. Ceremony goes fine. Hooray! Reception time. SO's stepmother insults several of my friends' looks as they are trying to eat. One of my bridesmaids is a woman with multiple disabilities. I worked for her and provided care for many years when I worked in social services. Groomsmen make fun of her and they ask why all the retards at this wedding. My grandfather sees a tattoo of a dragon through the back of my dress. Proceeds to shove me and tell me the Bible says dragons are satanic/I'm going to hell now. My mother told everyone it was a good thing I'd gotten my own dress because there was no way hers could have been let out enough to fit me. I wasn't remotely overweight. Maid of Honor's mother breaks down and starts crying when she hears Nat King Cole playing. Apparently it was her and her recently deceased husband's favorite song and she is absolutely bawling in the middle of the reception. Maid of Honor and I have to take her outside and calm her down while someone changes the music. The best part is, we had legally gotten married at a courthouse 6 months before, told no one, and only had the wedding because of our frocking families. 2 things. 70 more guests showed up than were invited. Turns out Mill was inviting people and not telling us. We ran out of chairs, food, everything. Except wine, we had plenty of that. Someone stole the wedding gifts. My mother-in-law invited several people to our wedding, without our knowledge or permission. Luckily my father-in-law told my husband what she'd done, and my husband made her call every single person she'd invited and tell them she'd done it without us knowing and that they couldn't come. She was furious and kept going on about how it'd make her look bad/stupid if she had to uninvite them, but my husband didn't care and still made her do it. She didn't talk to us for a couple of weeks after that. The wedding was nothing as expected, but the marriage has been nothing but a blessing. It rained non-stop. The venue was outside with a gazebo-type structure, we still held it there, just closer to the middle so we wouldn't get wet. We had a low-budget wedding, so no live band, just a DJ. We gave him the music for the first husband/wife song at rehearsal and all was good. Once it was time for the dance he played the wrong song 3 times, until my husband had it and left me standing in the middle while he went to put the damn music himself. We hired a professional photographer and also asked our families to take pics with the 3 cameras that we had. We have a total of 10 pictures for the whole thing. The professional photographer only had 6 good pictures, everything else was ruined for some reason. The pictures taken with our cameras were all ruined also. This was 17 years ago, so I am fuzzy on the details, but all in all, we only got 4 pictures from those cameras. We were to stay at a hotel in the honeymoon suite and then the next day travel to our honeymoon destination. When we arrived to the hotel, around 1 in the morning I think, they had already given the honeymoon suite to a family because they forgot it was reserved, so we had to stay in a regular room. Edit. Just to clarify, because a lot are asking, this is a third world country, very poor, and at the time we had just started rebuilding after a long war. Customer service was non-existing, technology for the pictures was really bad, so it was a very different time/place from what we would know as normal now, or what we would expect now. At the time, if things went sideways you tough it out and move on. There was no compensation, refunds, or anything like that. So my cousin recently got married to his long-term partner and the actual wedding itself went really well. The reception directly after the ceremony, however, was marred somewhat by the bride's parents announcing halfway through the night and completely out of the blue that they would be divorcing. Not my wedding, but a close friend's colleague. So much went wrong, but I'll summarize. Unexpected heavy rain. Wedding ceremony shifted to inside venue. Ceiling collapsed from heavy rainfall right on top of elaborate wedding cake. Luckily the bride and groom had a very good sense of humor and the venue refunded a fair amount of what they had paid out of goodwill. My aunt and uncle were getting married outside in fall, at a beautiful garden. All the guests arrived but the priest did not. Finally they got a call from the hospital saying the priest had food poisoning. So they grabbed a waiter, sent a groomsman to the Halloween store, and had a wedding where they were married by a suspiciously waitery-looking priest. My sisters. As we were sitting down to eat, a guest started screaming. The groom's mother went into cardiac arrest. I called 911. They came and attended to her, and as we were outside watching them load her into the ambulance, I heard more screaming. Someone ran out and told me that they had better come back into the venue. I run inside and see my grandfather laying on the floor. I ended up riding with him to the hospital. I think he just fainted from the commotion, but we didn't know that at the time. They took both of them to the same hospital. Doctor looked at both of them as they were being wheeled in and remarked, "Must have been one hell of a party." My wedding was awesome, but there was some craziness. An ambulance was called when one of my groomsmen decided to take a bite out of his pint glass and eat it, on a dare he drunkenly made to himself. My wife and I only learned of this after the fact, as they were good about keeping it away from us. We had our roommate become a reverend online, Universal Life Church, to marry us, who did a great job, but many of the guests thought we just hired a Catholic priest. We come from Catholic families, e.g., we just referred to him as Reverend. Several friends were impressed with the Reverend busting moves on the dance floor and then expressed surprise when he was drunkenly making out a large black man. We had an open bar until midnight and then a lower-key cash bar for 2 hours after that. Most guests stayed at the venue, which was also a hotel. Our priest and someone described as a large black man were observed stealing a bottle of Grey Goose from the cash bar, so the next morning when we were finalizing everything we got to pay $300 for it, or they could call the authorities. Also, we had given our reverend a bottle of Johnny Walker, along with the other groomsmen, but he just never opened his groomsman gift. Not my wedding but my parents'. I wasn't around to experience it, but their friends and family still talk about it to this day. The main culprit was the heavy rain that caused minor flooding and tons of road closures. Mother was very late to the church. My father broke down convinced that she was going to be a no-show. Not only was the taxi that was taking her to the church late due to road closures, it also managed to hit her as she was running to get in, causing a small rip and minor staining on her dress. A few members of the bridal party were so late they completely missed the ceremony. At the hotel reception, the DJ could not figure out how to get to the venue due to road closures, and being unfamiliar with the area. The first half of the reception was basically quiet until the groomsmen found that the restaurant in the hotel had a jukebox. The restaurant let them move it to the banquet hall where they paid quarters for music. Almost half of their guests did not come, again due to the rain. The hotel was understaffed due to the road closures, so food took a very long time to come out. A guest who must have been literally dying of hunger helped herself to the wedding cake prior to it being cut. It really sucked on the day, but now they look back on it and laugh. Whenever we're at a wedding now and the bride is on the verge of tears due to things not going perfectly, my mom will always say, "Don't worry about it, I got hit by a car on my wedding day and everything still worked out." My uncle decided that I should run the camera at the wedding since I was the most technically literate out of the family. What he failed to realize was that I was technically literate because I pressed all the buttons to figure out what they do, so his wedding video is a combination of weird zooming, different lighting settings flashing on and off, and parts cutting in and out as I fiddled with other settings. The last minute of them walking out of the church looked great though once I got everything dialed in. I was a groomsman in a wedding for my uncle and his fiancée. I was maybe 14 and pretty nervous. I stood up straight as a board, knees locked apparently. It turns out when you stand up with your knees locked you start a pass-out timer. My timer ran out during the vows. My recently widowed mother was losing her shite, arms flailing wildly in the air as she ran to check on me screaming, "Oh my baby, my baby." Over and over, the wedding was paused as 10 people rushed to save me. We still watch it on VHS from time to time, pretty funny these days. My other uncle didn't put me in the wedding party a couple months later, never found out why. Not my wedding, thank God. Friend's sister got married. Big Italian wedding. No one but the bride is sure about the groom. Mom is helping the bride on with her dress and saying, "You can still back out, I promise I won't say anything about the money." 1 hour into the reception, the bride is drunk off her ass in the ladies' room, screaming, "I've made a terrible mistake." Marriage lasted, I think, 4 months, then she ran off with his best friend and he, the groom, shot himself. Sad face. Not my wedding, but the groom kissed me on the dance floor, touched several other women without consent. The priest was a creep and grabbed my friend's butt. The groom accused the bride of cheating with the bartender, who is gay and a friend of ours for years. The groom ended up throwing his ring into the woods at the end of the night. The bride stayed in a friend's hotel while he went home and went into a rage. 1. The DJ took the money and ran, went out of business and didn't bother letting me know, so we played iPhone music on a little speaker all night. 2. There were two separate fires, a grease fire from the catfish being fried on site, and a fire from the fireworks set off at the wrong time, right after the ceremony, when it was still light out. Although if they'd been set off at night, everybody would have been too drunk to put out the fire, so I guess that was a good thing. 3. It was about 20 degrees warmer than usual for the season, so I was absolutely dying in my very elaborate dress, which wasn't finished until 2 days before the wedding because the seamstress was fired and nobody at the boutique bothered to check on her work until my mother swept in and started kicking ass. That entire chain went out of business a year later. 4. I ended up hating most of the pictures. The photographer was not very creative and I ended up having to direct her for most of the shoot, which was exhausting. 5. Bonus, a hurricane hit our honeymoon destination the day before we got there, so it was pouring the entire time except, of course, the day we left. On the other hand, people still tell me our wedding was the prettiest they'd ever been to, and the actual ceremony was the most moving experience of my life. I would do so many things differently if I could, but a wedding isn't a marriage, and my marriage is pretty great. Mother-in-law made the wedding about herself. Not the biggest issue though. She did 2 things I'll never forget. 1. Made the table layout for our guests and completely left off the family friend and his wife that performed the funeral service for my mother who had passed less than a month before my wedding. 2. Again, my mother-in-law, drunk as hell already on wedding wine before we even started getting dressed, approached me right as we were doing the group pictures and said, "Congratulations, looks like I'm now the new mom." And then she noticed the rage-filled look on my face and quietly said, "In-law." She was sitting next to the rose I had placed on my mother's chair before the service started. Needless to say, that entire day was an emotional roller coaster. Oh, and the night before at the rehearsal dinner, my dumb-ass sister who was a bridesmaid totaled my mother's car she was illegally driving, while intoxicated, right in front of the restaurant and had my soon-to-be wife hold her purse while she spoke to the police without telling her there was a pipe and bag of weed in it. I'll never forget May to June of 2017. Many years ago I worked in the wedding industry for 5 years, video. Here's a snippet of disasters. 1. Mother of the groom got really drunk and fell onto the wedding cake, caught on camera. 2. Best man went to the bathroom, took his wedding ring off to wash his hands, left it on the counter. Not even a minute later he went back in and it was gone. Never found it. Only family and friends at the wedding. 3. Mother of the bride spilled liquid foundation down the front of her raw silk dress before they left the house. Had to wear a different outfit. 4. Wedding reception set up an entire wedding for approximate 400 guests, with the totally wrong color scheme, flowers, and food. There was a wedding the next day, and unbelievably the bride and groom of that wedding, had exactly the same names. First and last. 5. Bride and groom were on their honeymoon, came back and found their house had been broken into, every stick of furniture taken, every gift taken, every wall broken, sinks ripped out and glass smashed. Police found out it was the ex-BF of the bride. 6. One bride, unfortunately, miscalculated her monthly cycle. Got out of the car at the church and obligatory not me, but intro. One of my oldest friends got married at the Renaissance Festival, as is very befitting of her if you know her. I was the mo and road trip for 2 hours with the rest of the bridal party, maids and groomsmen, split across 2 cars to the fairgrounds. We were told beforehand that tickets would be waiting for us at the box office and all we had to do was tell them who we were with and we'd be let in. No such tickets existed. Despite being in 2011, only a few people in our group had phones, but it mattered little since reception is terrible at the festival. We called and called and called the bride and everyone in her family, but we got no answer even on calls that did go through. All the festival employees would do is confirm there was a wedding taking place that day, but would not give us the name and refuse to even go check to tell the bride that her entire wedding party was stuck outside. We sat outside in the courtyard entrance for about 2 hours as the time of the ceremony ticked dangerously ever closer. Finally, with about 20 minutes to go, I spotted a white shape storming across the courtyard towards us. It was the bride, in her dress and with rollers in her hair. Somehow word had gotten to her about our predicament and she came to resolve the matter herself. She gave the employees at the gate holy hell over the matter and we were all rushed inside with the thinnest apologies you can imagine from them. On top of all of that, it turned out she had paid for the bridesmaids' hair and makeup to be professionally applied, something there was now no time for. Half of the bridesmaids showed up with bedhead and no makeup at all, and that's how they entered the ceremony. I managed to put a sloppy, vaguely medieval-looking braid circlet around my head as we walked to the backstage area where the procession was to begin. Given the location, it was requested the bridal party, men and women, dress in kind. Not the worst thing in the world, really. I was in college at the time and cash was scarce, but given that the bride and I have been friends since age 10 and I was the mo, I wanted to make the most of it. I spent $60 on a deluxe medieval princess dress from Target, just happened to be around Halloween, so score, with approval from the bride. It wasn't exactly Game of Thrones quality, but neither did it immediately look like something I bought on the relative cheap. The rest of the bridal party didn't put as much effort into it. They too seemed to do their shopping from the grocery store after Halloween clearance bin, and it was a sea of crushed velvet, plastic swords, polyester blends so thin they were see-through, and one pirate costume. A high school production of Macbeth would have looked better. The ceremony went off all right, even though regular festival goers kept poking their heads in. At the reception, the groom tried to be funny and smashed the cake into the bride's face, and it smeared her lipstick and somehow fell off the spoon and down the front of her dress, inside and out. It left a spot of an unfortunate shape and color down her bodice that her mom and sister desperately tried to get out. The whole thing was interesting. 5 years and one baby later, the husband suddenly up and announced he wanted out and they split. So, yeah,